In the year of our Lord 2016, Stranger Things burst on the scene and single-handedly tricked us into caring about Dungeons and Dragons and buying Eggos and made us all wish we were born in 1983. Gross. It was such a cultural phenomenon that almost a decade later, people are still excited for the series finale to come out, which will happen eventually the year that I'm making this video. This is interesting to me because the Stranger Things that everyone initially fell in love with died in season 2. I mean, what we're getting now is technically the same show, but the tone and the pace and just everything that fundamentally made it is gone, minus the same cast of rapidly aging child actors. For example, just look at the Demogorgon. In the first season, he was this big, slow thing that stalked and tormented his victims like it was his passion project. His building model trains, with a lot more hunting and a lot less trains. It took the creature forever to actually capture Will. And before he attacked Barb, he just stood behind her like a little weirdo for way too long. But that's not what he was like in season 4. That guy was fast. If the season 4 version of the Demogorgon was in season 1, there wouldn't even be a Stranger Things. There would just be a dead Will Byers. So what happened to Stranger Things between the beginning and the end of the show, you ask? Well, I don't know about season 5 because as we've established, it hasn't come out yet, but I argue that between season 1 and season 4, it was flanderized. Okay, so now you're asking, what does that mean? What is flanderization? According to tvtropes.com, the place the word originated, flanderization is the act of taking a single, often minor action or trait of a character within a work and exaggerating it more and more over time until it completely consumes the character. It was based off what happened to Ned Flanders from The Simpsons, where over the course of several seasons, the writers morphed him from a wholesome Christian family man into a religious fanatic. As previously mentioned, the term was originally coined to discuss characters, but I believe the idea of stripping something down to its base elements can really be applied to any aspect of a show over the course of its life. Basically, if something is nuanced, it can be flanderized. TM, that's my idea, but you can borrow it. Flanderization is often seen as a derogatory term. It signals laziness and a lack of care or vision from the writers. And while I usually agree with that, like in the case of The Simpsons or Stranger Things Season 3, I think it actually led to the redemption of Stranger Things in Season 4. Let me explain for the remainder of the video. This is what the video is about. Stranger Things as we know it today was never supposed to happen. The plan wasn't to make 5 drawn-out seasons continuing the story of the same 5 main characters over the course of 9 years. The Duffer Brothers originally pitched only 1 season with a superpowered little girl, a missing boy, and a shadow monster/world. After that, if the studio did want to keep it going, the series would continue with the same group of characters, but 10 years later so they can have different actors and fresh faces. Cool. But you little gluttons couldn't leave well enough alone. You ate up that first season and you dressed as a bald child for Halloween and increased Eggo waffle consumption by 14%. That is not a fake fact, that is true. Millie Bobby Brown is not an interesting or good actor. Tell me one thing you've seen with her that isn't Stranger Things. Enola Holmes? You're lying. No one saw that. There is no reason for her to still be in the public eye. But no, you had to ask for more. You had to have more of those cute little kids in the 80s vibes. You couldn't have your fill. With that came season 2. The one that everyone seems to think is just a repeat of season 1. And you want to know why everyone thinks that? It's because it is. The story was over. Do you think they planned for there to be more children living with Eleven in the science place? Absolutely not. Papa wasn't meant to have so many kids. He had dreams and a fairly active dating life. They retconned it so they could have a deeper well to reach into when you all begged for another season. Aside from that, the most significant thing to come out of the season was the addition of some key characters that added a new dynamic to this group of kids that had nothing left to explore together. Also Bob Newby, God rest his soul. Despite season 2's flaws, it became one of the most lucrative and watched things on Netflix. People could not stop talking about these freaking kids. So they gave you a 3rd season with the same group of people again. But where do you go with a series that was supposed to be over 2 years ago that's already repeated the original plot? Well, according to the makers of Stranger Things, you lean into the reason you're making a new season. You strip it down to what people say they love about the show and get rid of the rest. Because, let's be honest, that's why you're doing it. So just give the people what they want and no one gets hurt. But boy, was season 3 ever painful. To understand what made season 3 so wrong, we have to reminisce about what made season 1 oh so right. It was scary and monster heavy, but classy. It was suspenseful and the mystery made you feel like you were going on a journey. It was funny, but in a subtle way that was appropriate for a show about missing children.
Where are you from, exactly? bad place.
Sweden.
It was reminiscent of 70s and 80s horror movies with striking visuals and a creative vision. It was gloomy without being too dark, and the shots were wide and painterly. Characters felt nestled inside the images instead of being the focus of them. The show felt like it belonged in the 80s without overly relying on the decade for its appeal. But what really stuck out to me, and I think most audiences, was the characters and how they played with and subverted 80s movie stereotypes. Seriously, the entire show was just people appearing like they'd fit into one trope and then completely steering away from it. You don't just watch the next episode because of the mystery, you want to see what these characters are gonna do next. Steve Harrington, for example, went from popular douche to protective, sensitive boy. It was a strong character arc where he fought against social pressures and insecurities to become a better person. And he's not even the best example. Hopper is. When Hopper first showed up, I thought he was gonna be one of those like bumbling, hard-headed cops that would side with the big company and be an obstacle to whatever the kids were doing. But he wasn't! Instead, he was suspicious of the establishment and automatically on the right side of things. He had a complete storyline independent of everyone else doing his own investigation and used the big dumb police stereotype to trick people into giving him answers.
What's your name again?
It's Jim Hopper. Chief Jim Hopper.
Yeah, I've got Jim Hopper here.
It was a big part of what made the show so great. Season 3, on the other hand, took everything good about Season 1 and just shit on it. They took all the things that people weren't talking about online and just replaced them with more of what they did. Forget the artful composition or subtle mystery. You said you liked how 80s Stranger Things was? We're setting this bitch in a mall, and we're going full out neon and having shopping montages and making unnecessary pop culture references while these kids are battling for their lives. New Coke! Am I right, children?
Sweeter, bolder, better.
You formed parasocial relationships with this assorted cast of colorful characters? We're gonna boil them down to the one personality trait you all associate with them and make them really angsty about their quote-unquote relatable personal drama. And if that makes them boring or annoying or unwatchable, so be it. Say it with me, they flanderized it. The only things that worked about Season 3 were the new characters they brought in and the ones whose development happened in Season 2. So like Dustin, Steve, Max, Lucas's sister, Maya Hawke, Billy, God rest his soul. And the reason why is because they weren't tailor-made to work in one very specific situation centered around child abduction. They were either casted when they were older so the producers had more information on their screen presence, picked specifically to fit this new poppy fun tone they were going for, or grew into charismatic people that you wanted to see on screen because they were originally meant as comic relief. However, I think I'm the only one that didn't like the season since it was greenlit for a 4th. Season 4 could have easily been awful. They had already stripped down the show to its most superficial components. They could have kept riding that train and it would have been fine as long as the children didn't age past 40. And this is where it gets cool again, because they didn't do that. Instead, it kind of looked like they were using flanderization to figure out what was and wasn't working in this new world they were playing in. Then they took out anything that wasn't serving the show and just played up the parts that did. First off, the least interesting characters in the whole show are Will, Mike, Jonathan, and Eleven. There is no arguing that, those are just facts. They were pretty useless past the first, maybe second season. Jonathan was too emo, Will didn't have anything to do when he wasn't being kidnapped, and Mike and Nell were just uppity and the relationship was disgusting. When they stopped centering the show around them, you could see that they really didn't do much to enhance anything else. They're not funny or charismatic, they're just artifacts of a different time. And I think the writers agree with me, because they took every single one of those characters out and moved them far, far away to California. You only really see them every so often in an F-plot in the company of Argyle, a stoner who can't really remember where he is and can barely speak in coherent sentences, and is also an arguably more palatable character. And because the writers got them out of the main plot, they were able to focus more on the characters with range and chemistry that didn't bring down every scene they were in. They brought in Eddie, God rest his soul. Eddie's sick, but they only had space for him because they unshackled the group from the handcuffs of mediocrity. Secondly, they brought mystery back to the story. Vecna wasn't just an extension of what had already happened in every other season. He was a new threat with his own backstory and motivations. There were red herrings and surprises and suspense. It felt like the season was driven by a mixture of actual plot and characters as opposed to just thin personal drama. And thirdly, they made the in-your-face 80s work for the story. People thinking Eddie was a Satan worshiper because of The Rock and the D&D wasn't made up for the show. My more historically inclined viewers will know that there was a real thing called a satanic panic where people would accuse misfits of devil worship and causing all the world's problems. And they didn't just randomly have all the characters listen to 80s music for no reason. Running Up That Hill is literally a weapon. It was kind of the spiritual successor to Should I Stay or Should I Go in the first season, but a lot more cinematic, which made sense for the tone of the season. It really shows how talented the writers are. They used the Flanderization fan service of the show to make something new that can stand independent of everything that came before it. It helped them understand where they needed to build and cut back where they needed to cut back. So, because I'm me and I can't just enjoy things, here's my takeaway from all of this. Nothing is inherently bad. Just because people see Flanderization as this big faux pas doesn't mean it has to be that. It's just a neutral thing that happens over time and can be used like any other literary tool. I think literary applies here. I'm gonna keep it. It might not. Tell me in the comments. You just need to care about what you're doing to make it the best it could possibly be, as opposed to catering to what you think people want. Just a reminder, Stranger Things was originally greenlit as a completely new project in a time where the only things getting made were based on recognizable IP, and it still became one of the most popular things ever because the Duffer Brothers had a distinct vision. So it kind of makes sense that straying away from that vision almost killed it, while going back to it gave it a second wind. And while I have zero clue what Stranger Things 5 is going to be like, I am so excited to see what's going to happen next. And if they keep doing what they did in season 4, I'm sure it's going to be great. And if it does go bad, I'm gonna be so embarrassed. And those are my thoughts on Stranger Things. Do you agree with me? Not agree with me? Do you still care about Stranger Things? I'm curious to see what you say in the comments. But thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you want to support the channel, you can push the like button and subscribe. And if you want to see what I'm doing outside of YouTube, you can follow me on Instagram at 500 Days of Ari. As a kind of ending note, this is an update for people who care about me. Hi. I have not been making as many videos because I'm getting married this year, and wedding planning has been the bane of my existence and taking up 90% of my time. However, I have been working on several videos for you that will come out hopefully soon / eventually, but you can get ready for them. So I have one that I'm making about Funko Pops and how I think they're just basically a case study for exploitative collectible. I have another one I'm working on about why the Kitchen Nightmares YouTube channel is so unhinged. If you know, you know. I have one about I'm Thinking of Ending Things and how Charlie Kaufman interpreted the books into a film. It's about auteur theory. I think it's gonna be really fun. But the one that's closest to coming out is Funko Pops. Anyway, that's that. Thank you for sticking with me. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.